Welcome to the sleeping hourglass. Tonight, we drift back to a world at war, to mud-soaked forests and trembling silence, and to a forgotten hero who rose not from ranks or titles, but from the sky itself. Her name was Cher Ami, a simple pigeon whose fragile wings carried hope through smoke, fire, and fear. If these quiet journeys bring you comfort, you're always welcome to support this space with a soft like or a subscribe, only if it feels right, only if it adds to the calm. Before every great storm, there is a silence so wide it seems to stretch across the world. It hovers over fields, over seas, over the quiet pulse of ordinary lives. In that silence, people go about their days, writing letters, turning soil, kissing their children goodnight, unaware that history is already holding its breath. It is the summer of 1914. Europe glows golden under the sun, a continent draped in peace that feels eternal. But peace, like morning mist, can vanish before anyone notices it's gone. Beneath the laughter of cafes in Paris and the clatter of trains in Berlin, something trembles. In Vienna, a bullet will soon be fired. A single spark that sets the world ablaze. The nations do not yet know they are standing on the edge of a century's wound. Diplomats speak of alliances, of honor, of duty, words that sound noble until they are soaked in blood. The newspapers print headlines that stir pride and fear in equal measure. Flags unfurl. Young men cheer in the streets, their hearts full of purpose. The war to end all wars has not yet begun, but its shadow is already touching the hem of every heart. In England, the countryside remains deceptively calm. The hedgerows hum with bees, and the air smells of rain and hay. Yet even here, in this green cradle of calm, the call of war drifts on the wind. Horses are gathered for the army. Boys from small villages line up at recruitment tents. And in the quiet corners of farms and estates, another kind of preparation unfolds. One both ancient and strangely gentle. In a Dovercote not far from London, feathers rustle in the dim light. Rows of pigeons, sleek and watchful, shift on their perches. Their keepers move quietly among them, murmuring soft words. These are not wild birds but messengers, trained couriers of the sky. Long before the world hums with radio signals, before cables carry words beneath oceans, it is pigeons who bear the weight of human hope from one place to another. Among the hundreds of birds being bred and trained for service, there are a few with a particular brightness in their eyes, a kind of restless intelligence. One of them is a small hen pigeon with soft grey feathers that shimmer faintly blue in the light. She is not named yet. For now, she is simply one among many, a creature of instinct, learning the invisible geometry of flight, tracing circles against the morning sky. The men who tend her are soldiers of the Royal Signal Corps, working under the guidance of those who have known pigeons for generations. They build lofts, clean coops, and record every bird's number and route. They whistle softly as the birds return from their practice flights, wings slicing through the air like whispers. To these men, the pigeons are both soldiers and symbols. Delicate bodies bound to invisible threads of communication. The science is simple but miraculous. A pigeon, once taken from its home and released miles away, can find its way back with unerring precision. It flies through fog, through rain, through storms of wind and smoke. It does not question why, it simply returns. In a world soon to be shattered by human confusion, this quiet certainty will become something sacred. As night falls, the pigeons coo softly in their lofts, a lullaby of feathered hearts. Beyond the walls, the world begins to shudder. In Sarajevo, an archduke lies dead. In London, the newspapers roar. In Berlin, crowds cheer for mobilization. And in Paris, the bells ring, not for celebration, but for the end of something vast and fragile. When the war finally comes, it moves like a tide no one can stop. It floods cities, fields, and dreams. Men who had never left their hometowns find themselves beneath foreign skies, marching through mud. Horses vanish into artillery smoke. Letters are censored, messages lost. In the labyrinth of trenches that soon scar France and Belgium, words, once the light of human connection, become rare and precious. It is in this chaos that the pigeons will rise. Months later, the British armies begin sending birds to France. The small hen pigeon travels among them, packed in a crate marked with care. She hears the rumble of the ship's engine, feels the salt air brush her feathers, and smells the strange metallic scent of the sea. The men nearby smoke in silence, thinking of home. One of them, perhaps, glances at the crate and smiles, not knowing that inside it rests a creature who will someday carry a message worth more than his own heartbeat. On the other side of the channel, France lies wounded but defiant. Villages have been reduced to dust. Forests are stripped of their leaves by shellfire. The air tastes of iron and ash. In this world of broken soil, the pigeons are given new homes, wooden lofts perched beside dugouts and observation posts. Their wings beat above the trenches like brief flashes of grace, reminders that something pure still dares to move freely in the sky. The soldiers call them angels. They watch them rise and vanish into clouds, their hearts lifting for a moment with each flight. For every letter that fails to reach a mother, for every comrade lost without word, the sight of a pigeon returning is a small miracle. The small grey hen flies often now. She grows stronger with each journey, learning to navigate smoke and fear, to trust the pull of home, no matter how far she goes. Around her, men leave and die within the same few miles of mud. Yet she crosses mountains and rivers as if the world were still whole. No one gives her a name yet. Not yet. That will come later, after a forest called Argonne, after a message written in trembling hand, after bullets and fire. For now, she is simply one heart among millions, beating in time with a world that is about to break itself apart. Above the fields of Europe, the first thunder of guns rolls through the distance. The silence that once stretched across the world shatters into echo and flame. And somewhere, in a wooden loft not far from the front, a small pigeon tilts her head toward the sound, listening, as if she understands that her wings will soon carry more than just air. Soon, feathers will meet iron, and instinct will meet destiny. In the coming chaos, even the smallest wings will be asked to bear the weight of war, and the world will remember how messages once flew. Long before the hum of electricity bound continents together, messages moved with the wind. In the days when battles still depended on runners, mirrors, and smoke, there existed a quieter thread, one woven of feather and instinct. The story of military communication is, in its earliest form, a story of trust in something both fragile and miraculous, the homing pigeon. By the early 20th century, armies were tangled in their own growing webs of wire. Telegraph cables stretched like veins across landscapes, pulsing with Morse's steady heartbeat. But wires could be cut, lines could be lost in mud, shellfire, or sabotage. The more the world depended on them, the more easily they broke under war's weight. And so, as modernity marched into the chaos of the First World War, Generals found themselves reaching back to an ancient ally, one that had served pharaohs and emperors, crusaders and explorers. The pigeon. For millennia, these birds had been trusted to find home across oceans of air. They had carried the news of Olympic victories in Greece, delivered the outcomes of battles to Roman consuls, even brought stock prices to financiers before the age of wires. Their gift was not human invention, but nature's mystery, a compass of the soul, an inner map that no science could fully explain. When war came to Europe in 1914, it was not the telegraph or the radio that would prove most faithful. It was wings. The British Army had maintained pigeon lofts since the Boer War. By 1914, they had refined the art. Small, mobile coops mounted on wagons and trucks, carried as close to the front as daring would allow. The French, masters of avian communication since the Franco-Prussian War, shared their wisdom freely. Their lofts were grander, their birds seasoned veterans of storm and smoke. They trained them in pairs and battalions, mapping their routes between fortresses and outposts with mathematical care. Each bird was a whisper waiting to be released. A fragment of human thought, written in pencil, sealed in a tiny metal capsule, and tied gently to a leg that had never known rest. The pigeons did not question the message, nor the fear that birthed it. They only flew. When America joined the war in 1917, her soldiers arrived with rifles still smelling of factory oil, their boots new, their uniforms stiff. The US Army Signal Corps had radios and telegraphs, but France's battlefield swallowed such devices whole. Lines were cut by artillery, soaked in rain, or buried under collapsed trenches. The wireless units were cumbersome, unreliable, easily detected by the enemy. And so, once again, eyes turned skyward. In a quiet corner of training grounds, under tents stitched with the dust of Europe, American officers studied the old French lofts. They learned how to build dovercoats from scrap wood and wire mesh, how to feed the birds, how to release them with care. It was an odd sight. Soldiers in mud-caked boots holding cooing pigeons, their fingers gentle, their expressions reverent. Some laughed at the irony of it. Men, surrounded by machinery, relying on birds older than history itself. Yet when the first messages returned home, wings gleaming in sunlight, the laughter turned to silence. The ancient art still worked. Each army division would soon have its own pigeon section, 30 to 40 trained birds, tended by a sergeant and a handful of handlers. They travelled with the troops, their cages strapped to wagons or slung on pack animals. The birds ate little, demanded little, and gave everything. They could fly up to 50 miles an hour, covering vast distances in minutes when no human messenger could survive the same path. Training was delicate work. Each pigeon was raised in a specific loft. That loft became its home. From there, it was carried out in small wicker baskets to various release points, growing accustomed to strange terrains, learning to find its way back no matter how far it was taken. The birds were taught to fly at dawn and dusk, to navigate by the shifting dance of light and wind. Their loyalty was not to man, but to the memory of home, and through that loyalty, men found hope. Soldiers began to speak of them with a kind of awe. They saw how, even through artillery barrages, the birds returned. Their feathers torn, sometimes bloodied, yet the capsule intact. In the trenches, where letters often never arrived, a pigeon's flight became a prayer. Feathers and wires. Two technologies, one ancient and one new, wove the war's communications together. On one side, telegraph poles stretched like skeletons across the horizon. On the other, small lofts huddled beside dugouts, glowing with lamplight and cooing sounds. Between them fluttered a fragile bridge, a reminder that sometimes, in the heart of destruction, humanity's oldest companions are still its most faithful. The French pigeon named Vaillant carried the last message from the besieged fortress of Verdun in 1916, delivering coordinates that saved hundreds before succumbing to gas. The British pigeon Winky would later earn medals for saving downed airmen, and in a small training loft somewhere near the French coast, among hundreds of birds being prepared for duty, there was one whose eyes reflected a peculiar brightness, calm, intelligent, and almost questioning. She would later be called Cher Ami, dear friend, but for now, she was simply another wing in the great chorus of the sky. There is a tenderness in imagining these scenes. Soldiers cleaning the coops, writing messages with shaking hands, and whispering to the birds as they tied the capsules. Fly fast, they might say, fly home. And the pigeons, sensing no meaning but feeling the urgency, would take off in a sudden blur of grace. Over the fields, over smoke and ruin, they became the last pure things still moving between enemies. In war, communication is the difference between life and death. But here, amid the shriek of shells, the carriers of life were feathered and wordless. A pigeon could not know the desperation bound in its message, could not read the trembling script that begged for reinforcements, food, or mercy, yet time and again it carried such words faithfully. Each flight was an act of faith, not the soldier's faith in God, but in the unseen, that the bird would reach, that someone would read, that help would come. In a world tearing itself apart, that kind of faith became its own quiet form of resistance. As months turned into years, the Pigeon Corps grew into a network that spanned the Western Front. France alone used over 60,000 pigeons. Britain bred thousands more. The US Army, late to the war, but eager to learn, carried crates of birds across the Atlantic. In the trenches, they built small lofts from ammunition boxes, hung makeshift perches, and painted the roofs in camouflage to hide them from enemy snipers. Each loft had its own keeper, a man who learned to listen to the rhythm of wings, to know by sound when a message had come home. For those men, the cooing of pigeons was not background noise. It was the sound of survival. The bond between soldier and bird was unspoken but deep. A wounded messenger might be wrapped in cloth, tended like a comrade. Some soldiers swore the birds recognized their voices. Perhaps they did, for even in chaos, creatures remember kindness. In this strange partnership of feathers and wires, the world glimpsed something rare. The union of instinct and invention, of nature and human need. Wires could hum and spark, but they could also fail. Wings, though fragile, carried on. And so the war continued, with men buried in trenches, with generals hunched over maps, and with pigeons cutting paths through the fog above it all. Each one a small defiance of the silence that war tries to impose. One of these birds, the little grey hen from the English lofts, would soon find herself on the front lines of France, among the mud and madness, her training complete, her spirit unwavering. She would be assigned to an American unit preparing for a campaign through the Argonne Forest, a place where thousands would vanish into shadow and where her name would finally be written into history. Soon, across the Atlantic, soldiers and pigeons alike will face the green darkness of the Argonne. In that forest, Every breath will tremble with uncertainty, and every message will depend on wings. The sea is wide, grey, and endless. Across it, in convoys of creaking ships, America sails toward a war already half consumed by its own fire. On every deck stand young men who have never seen Europe, never smelled the sour sweetness of its battlefields, never imagined the sound of artillery as a constant heartbeat. They carry rifles, letters from home, photographs folded into shirt pockets. And in the cargo holds below them, inside wicker crates lined with straw, are passengers who cannot understand war, yet will soon serve it faithfully. Among the food rations and ammunition, the crates tremble with soft rustles and faint coos. Pigeons, hundreds of them, travelling from America to the front lines of France. Some are bred from the old British and French lines, others from American lofts raised hastily in the months since the US entered the Great War in 1917. Their wings folded in the dark wait for open air. They are the quietest travellers aboard these crowded ships, yet their journey will prove as vital as any soldier's. Above deck, the wind is sharp and salted. The soldiers lean against the rails, watching the horizon dissolve into mist. Behind them lies the calm of home, the steady rhythm of trains, the laughter of small towns, the scent of tobacco and pine. Ahead lies the unknown. Some write in journals, some pray, and some, watching the gulls trace the ship's wake, think of the birds below deck. How strange it is that creatures so small, so soft, are also bound for the same war. When the ships reach Europe, the soldiers disembark into a world stripped bare. France, once green and orderly, is now a scar of mud and wire. Trenches carve the land like wounds that refuse to close. Villages lie in ruins. Their churches roofless, their bells silent. The air smells of gunpowder and damp earth, a mix that seeps into every uniform, every breath. The American Expeditionary Forces, raw, hopeful, untested, march through the wreckage of old Europe. They arrive to join a war that has already devoured millions. Their footsteps echo the ghosts of Verdun, the Somme. They see the veterans of those battles. Hollow-eyed, mud-stained men who move like shadows through the fog. From them, the Americans learn what the newspapers never printed. That war is not a march of glory, but a long, cold wait between explosions. And through it all, the pigeons are there. In the camps behind the front lines, the Signal Corps begins building its lofts. They are simple structures. Wooden frames, slanted roofs, wire mesh to let the wind pass through. Each division has its own loft, each loft its keepers. Soldiers who once worked on farms now tend these birds, cleaning the coops, mixing feed, and recording flight times. They wear uniforms like any other soldiers, but their duties are quieter. A mixture of care and precision, patience and faith. The pigeons are trained in small steps. Released a few miles from their loft, they circle, orient themselves, and return. Then farther, 10 miles, 20, 50, they fly over villages, rivers, the fractured ribs of forests stripped by shellfire. They return every time. Their reward is simple: a handful of seed, a gentle touch, a moment of rest. Among these birds is one that stands out, small, light grey, with a shimmer like smoke across her wings. Her eyes are bright and steady. She has not yet been named, but the men who care for her notice her calmness, the way she never startles even at the crack of distant guns. She will later be known as Cher Ami, dear friend. For now, she is one among hundreds learning to trust the sky. The war around her grows louder by the week. At night, The horizon flickers with artillery, faraway bursts that light the clouds like summer lightning. The pigeons sleep through it, their feathers puffed, their coos blending with the sound of distant thunder. In the mornings, soldiers wake before dawn. They write messages in pencil on thin paper, coordinates, requests, warnings, and roll them carefully into capsules. Each message is a prayer, written not in words, but in desperation. Then comes the release, a soldier's hand lifting a bird toward the light, a whisper of hope, a flutter, and the sudden blur of wings. The pigeons vanish into the smoke, rising above trenches where men cling to life. Some are lost to hawks or shellfire, some never return. But others, enough of them, find their way back, gliding home through wind and danger. Their bodies streaked with mud and soot, the message still bound to their legs. The French soldiers call them les anges du front, angels of the front. To the Americans, they become symbols of something purer than the chaos around them. Creatures that refuse to lose direction, even when the world itself seems to have forgotten its way. In quiet moments, men visit the lofts just to watch them. Between battles, amid the constant hum of fear, the cooing of pigeons feels almost sacred. It reminds them of mornings before the war, of farms and rooftops and home. There is comfort in that sound, the soft rhythm of wings beating against a sky still capable of mercy. Cher Ami begins to fly longer routes now. The handlers test her endurance, her accuracy. She returns each time, no matter how far she is carried. There is something unwavering in her. A steadiness that will one day be called courage. But for now, there is only practice and waiting and the uneasy stillness before a storm. By late 1918, the American forces move into the Argonne Forest, a place the soldiers will soon name the Green Hell. The trees stand blackened, the ground churned into a soup of mud and roots. Here, the air is never still. Even in moments of calm, there is a tension that hums like a wire stretched too tight. It is into this world that the pigeons come. Their coops set near the front, their keepers risking their lives to keep the birds fed and ready. Messages travel faster now, their urgency heavier. The German lines press close. The fog hides both friend and foe. Every decision depends on communication, and every communication depends on something small enough to fit in a soldier's hands. One morning, as artillery rumbles in the distance, Cher Ami is released for another mission. The sky above the Argonne is a haze of smoke and shrapnel, but she flies into it without hesitation. Her wings beat steady. Cutting through the fog, the soldiers below watch her until she disappears. A speck swallowed by war's breath. She returns hours later, her feathers streaked with ash, her body trembling with exhaustion, but alive. The message she carries is brief, but vital. A call for supplies, a confirmation of positions. The handlers read it silently, nod, and give her fresh water. They write her number into the logbook, mark her as reliable, and tuck her gently back into her coop. They cannot know that in only a few days, she will carry a message that will change everything, that she will become a name remembered far beyond these fields. For now, she is just another soldier, wordless and steadfast, waiting for the next command. The pigeons' coops are silent again as dusk settles over the trenches. The men eat in silence, their tin plates cold before they finish. Somewhere down the line, a gramophone crackles with a tune from home. The sky turns violet, then black. The guns rest for a few hours, as if even they must breathe. Cher Ami closes her eyes. The world around her smells of smoke, iron, and fear. But in her mind there is only the shape of home, the instinct that never fades. She does not know the meaning of war or glory or sacrifice. She only knows flight and the pull of returning and the quiet duty written into her bones. In the distance, thunder mutters again. The storm is gathering, and soon she will be asked to fly through it. The Argonne waits, dark, tangled, and unforgiving. There, amid fire and confusion, one small bird will rise into history, carrying not only a message, but the last fragile thread of hope. The Argonne Forest is no longer a place. It is a living wound. Trees stand like ghosts in a sea of smoke, their trunks split by shells, their roots feeding on blood and rain. Somewhere beneath the broken canopy, 500 men lie scattered across a shallow ravine, their uniforms soaked through with mud that clings like another skin. They are not yet dead, but they are no longer alive as they once were. They are suspended between orders and silence, between hope and the unrelenting echo of gunfire. Major Charles Whittlesey does not sleep. He sits against a log, his face pale beneath the film of grime. Every few minutes, he lifts his head toward the treetops, listening for a sound that no longer comes. The drone of airplanes, the whistle of shells, the rustle of wings. The men whisper that heaven has gone deaf, but Whittlesey still listens, because listening is all that remains of command. The days have dissolved into one another. October 3rd, 4th, 5th. The calendar of their entrapment blurs in memory. The forest has become a kind of eternity, green, choking, endless. They have eaten nearly everything, scraps of bread, bits of leaves, even the roots of plants that grow near the stream. But the stream itself has turned foul, tainted by the dead. The men drink it anyway, the thirst heavier than the fear of sickness. Corporal McCollum crouches beside a tree, his rifle across his knees. He no longer looks for enemies. He watches instead for movement. A flicker of light, a ripple in the mist that might mean food or rescue or death. In war, the difference between those three grows thin. He looks up at Whittlesey and sees in him not an officer, but a man carrying the unbearable weight of command. A man who must decide who eats, who waits, who hopes. Somewhere above, the leaves shudder as a shell passes through them. Then, the forest erupts. The earth lifts, the air screams, and a dozen men fall before they can even cry out. The blast echoes, then another follows, and another. But the shells are not German. They come from the direction of their own lines. Their own brothers, unknowingly striking their position. Whittlesey's heart freezes. The realization hits not like a thought, but like an ache. They are being destroyed by the very army that sent them here. He shouts for the men to take cover, though there is nowhere left to hide. The ravine trembles. Trees topple. Mud rains from the heavens. A medic screams for help that no one can give. When the shelling quiets, only a few are still moving. The smell of iron and smoke hangs thick in the air. Whittlesey crawls through the ruin, his hands trembling. His voice hoarse as he calls out names. Names that echo back unanswered. He finds one of his signalers lying face down, the radio smashed to pieces beside him. The wires are burned through. The last connection to the outside world is gone. It is then, amid the ruin, that someone whispers the word, pigeons. At first it feels absurd, but slowly it becomes the only word that holds meaning. Pigeons, the living wires, the breath between armies, the ancient messengers who still remember the way home. They had brought a few with them, housed in small wicker baskets lined with straw. Most were gone now, released days earlier, lost to the wind or the bullets that fill it. Whittlesey moves toward the makeshift dovercoat at the edge of their encampment. There are 3 birds left. He opens the lid gently, as though afraid the noise might shatter the last thread of their hope. Inside, 3 pairs of eyes blink back at him. Calm, unknowing, patient. They do not see war, they see only the sky. He chooses one, a bird with pale feathers, and a dark streak across her neck. She stirs but does not resist as he lifts her out. A sergeant, hands shaking, tears a scrap of paper from his notebook. The message is written quickly, each letter pressed deep into the damp surface so it will not blur. We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. Whittlesey reads it twice, then folds it carefully. He slips it into the small metal capsule and ties it to the pigeon's leg. The bird coos softly, as though sensing the weight she now carries. Around them, men watch in silence, faces hollowed by hunger and disbelief. For a moment, even the guns seem to pause. Whittlesey raises the bird to his lips. "Go," he whispers, not as an order, but as a prayer. Then he releases her into the air. The wings flash once in the dim light, then vanish into the mist. For a breath, there is only silence, the soundless interval between faith and despair. Then the forest exhales. Gunfire resumes. The artillery screams again, and the men return to their trenches of mud and sorrow. But somewhere above, invisible to all of them, a single heartbeat rises through the smoke. Hours pass. The sky dims, then brightens again. No word returns. A second pigeon is sent, carrying the same plea. She too disappears into the green inferno, and the men watch her vanish as though watching their own chances fade. The wounded moan through the night. Some cry out for water, others for home. Whittlesey moves among them, his face unreadable, his hands steady. He does not speak of rescue anymore. He speaks only of endurance. "Hold," he says. "Hold until the dawn." But dawn in the Argonne feels like another illusion. A pale light that reveals only more suffering. The next morning, the shelling begins again. It is worse than before. Their own shells, larger now, closer. Whittlesey clenches his fists, watching the forest explode around him. He knows another message must go. He knows there is only one bird left. The final pigeon is small, mottled grey, her feathers streaked with mud. The men have named her Cher Ami. She has flown before, through smoke and danger, and always returned. Now she is their last hope, their last connection to the world beyond the green walls that close around them. Whittlesey hesitates as he writes the final message. He knows this note could save them, or be buried with them. He ties it to her leg himself, his fingers trembling not with fear, but with reverence. It is as though he is touching something sacred, the fragile thread of belief that still binds humanity together in war. He looks at her one last time, his hand trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what he is about to ask. The small pigeon rests in his palm, feathers darkened by soot, eyes glinting with something both fragile and eternal. Around them, the forest groans, smoke rising like breath from a dying world. The men are quiet now, hollow-eyed. Spent from days of hunger and despair, they have fought the enemy, fought the woods, fought their own fading hope. And now, all they have left is her. "Fly, Cher Ami," he says softly. The words fall like a prayer, half command, half benediction. Then, as his hand opens, she lifts into the air. For a second, she hesitates, as if the smoke itself were alive and reluctant to let her go. Then she beats her wings against the heavy air, cutting through the storm, rising from the shattered bones of the forest floor. The men watch her climb, a small, trembling shape swallowed by grey. Some cheer weakly, others bow their heads. They have sent their last prayer into the sky. Cher Ami flies low at first, weaving through branches slick with rain, bullets snapping like hornets around her. The German lines ahead are alive with fire, streaks of light and thunder chasing her through the clouds. She climbs higher, guided not by sight but by instinct, drawn toward the direction of home. Toward the signal corps loft miles away, where waiting hands and silent prayers await her. A shot rings out, then another. Cher Ami stumbles midair, struck through the breast. One leg dangles uselessly, a wing drags against the wind. For a heartbeat, she falters, begins to fall, then steadies herself again, driven not by thought, but by something older and deeper than instinct. Something like duty. Blood streaks her feathers. The wind roars around her. Each beat of her wings becomes a cry against the dying. She flies on, one eye blinded, one leg gone, a message clutched to her body like the last heartbeat of a trapped world. Behind her, in the ravine, the men wait. Some close their eyes and see home. New York, Kansas, Ohio, faces blurred by memory but kept alive by longing. Some whisper the names of mothers and sweethearts, their voices lost to the sound of distant gunfire. Others simply stare upward, as if her flight might somehow lift them, too, a single fragile life bearing all their hope upon its wings. The forest is silent now, save for the slow patter of rain beginning to fall. Soft at first, then heavier, it washes the grime from their faces, streaking mud and blood into quiet lines of grace. For a fleeting moment, it feels like forgiveness. Like the world itself has exhaled. Somewhere beyond their sight, beyond the reach of despair, Cher Ami is flying, through pain, through fire, through everything that denies life its right to survive. She flies, and back in the ravine of the Lost Battalion, there is only waiting. Waiting for a sound, a sign, a miracle carried on wings. And as the last echo of her flight fades into the storm, the forest holds its breath. For somewhere beyond the horizon, hope has taken flight. The sky is grey, the colour of old metal. It hums with the distant rhythm of gunfire, dull, unending, like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Over the Argonne, smoke hangs in curtains, thick as wool, shrouding the broken forest where the war has lost its reason. At the forward observation post, a young signalman squints into the haze. He has been listening for hours to the dull echo of shells. Too close, too irregular. Somewhere beyond those trees, men are dying not by enemy fire, but by the very hands meant to save them. Then, through the smoke, he sees it, a flicker of motion, small and trembling against the chaos. A speck, barely visible, tumbling and righting itself again and again, as though the wind itself is trying to keep it alive. "Pigeon incoming," he calls out, voice breaking the silence between explosions. The men look up. They can hardly believe it. The sky has long been the realm of destruction, shells, planes, and falling debris. But now something living crosses it, defiant. She comes closer. They see her feathers are torn, one leg hanging limply beneath her, a gleam of metal tied to it. Her flight is uneven, desperate, and then, with one final tremor of wings, she falls from the sky, not gracefully, but with the weight of exhaustion and blood. The soldiers rush forward. One kneels, scooping her from the mud with hands trembling as though he holds the world's last heartbeat. The bird is still breathing, chest rising in shallow, fragile pulses. "Get the message," someone says. He unties the small canister from her shattered leg. It's bent, but intact. Inside, a scrap of paper damp with sweat and rain. The man reads aloud, slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." There's a silence, a rare, suspended kind. The kind that only happens when men realize the line between life and death has narrowed to the width of a feather. Then everything moves at once. The message is rushed to the radio operators who relay it up the chain. Coordinates are confirmed, then corrected. Orders ripple through the lines like lightning through a storm. The guns, massive, deafening, impersonal, halt mid-barrage. The ground ceases its trembling, the Argonne exhales. And for the first time in days, the men trapped in that ravine are safe from their own fire. In the command tent, Major General Alexander leans over the report. His face is drawn, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. The details are brief. The kind of language war prefers. Message delivered by carrier Pigeon. Source: Lost Battalion. Artillery corrected. Estimated 194 lives saved. He lowers the paper. "What's the bird's condition?" he asks quietly. The aide hesitates. "She's alive, sir." "Barely," General Alexander nods. "Make sure she's cared for." It's a small order amid the 1,000 others he gives that day, yet it will be one of the few remembered. At the forward station, Cher Ami lies on a strip of canvas. Her feathers are clotted with mud and blood. One of the soldiers dribbles water onto her beak. She stirs weakly, one eye sealed shut by a dark crust of dried blood. "She's still breathing," he murmurs. "Would you look at that?" The medic nearby, a boy no older than 20, shakes his head in disbelief. "She flew through all that," he says softly, looking toward the horizon where the smoke still hangs. "All that? Just for a note." But it isn't just a note. The men know it. They've seen what that tiny message did. How the roar of artillery went silent. How the killing stopped. It's as if the bird carried not paper, but mercy itself. Outside, dusk settles over the Argonne. The forest glows faintly under the waning light, every leaf trembling with memory. Somewhere far away, a single gun fires, a lonely echo of the storm that once devoured this place. Inside the tent, the soldiers sit quietly, their voices low. They talk of home, of fields that are green, of kitchens that smell of bread, of the small sounds that peace makes. One of them looks at the pigeon, eyes soft. "She brought us a bit of home," he says. Another nods. "She brought us a chance." They will remember this night. They will remember that sometimes salvation arrives not on wings of glory, but in the fragile, trembling beat of a wounded bird. By morning, the orders are written. Cher Ami is to be sent to the medical corps. The men lift her gently, wrapping her in soft cloth. The broken leg is bound to a splint carved from a matchstick. Her breathing steadies. When she is carried out, the forest is strangely still. Only the sound of boots in the mud, and above it, a whisper of wind moving through branches like applause. News spreads faster than the morning light. From post to post, men repeat the story. A pigeon flew through enemy fire to stop friendly fire. She saved them. By the time it reaches headquarters in Paris, she has already become a symbol, not just of victory, but of endurance. A messenger who carried the weight of humanity in a war that had almost forgotten it. Weeks later, when the Lost Battalion is finally found and rescued, the soldiers are gaunt and silent. Their uniforms hang from their bodies like flags of survival. Major Whittlesey, the man who had tied the message to Cher Ami's leg, says little when told she made it through. He simply nods, his voice low. "I knew she would." He writes in his report, "One pigeon left. Released under heavy fire. Delivered message. Saved battalion." A sentence too small for what it means. History will later gild it, as it often does, calling it heroism, calling it a miracle. But in that moment, it is neither. It is simply life, insisting on itself, refusing to fall. When Cher Ami finally leaves the front, she travels with other messenger birds back to the United States Army Signal Corps. She is still limping, still half-blind, but alive. The soldiers who handle her treat her not as property, but as a comrade. They speak softly when near her, as though she still listens for orders. In her small, dark eyes, there remains the shimmer of the Argonne sky. The place where the world tried to kill her, and she refused to die. And because she lived, men lived too. History often remembers generals and kings, but sometimes it kneels before a creature no larger than a hand. As the guns fall silent and the soldiers rest, another kind of messenger waits beyond the fire, one whose courage is not carried in flight, but in the fragile beating of the human heart. The forest breathes again, not with wind, not yet, but with the trembling sighs of men who have seen too much. Smoke drifts between the trees, hanging like the ghost of battle, slow and uncertain. The thunder has stopped. For the first time in days, the world listens to itself. To the crackle of settling branches, to the faint drip of rain on mud, to the faint hum of silence reclaiming its ground. Major Whittlesey stands among what remains of his battalion. Once 550 strong, now barely 194 rise to answer his call. Faces are hollow, eyes like windows left open in a storm. No man speaks of victory. There is none to name. The only sound that stirs them is a soft coo from the cage that rests beside a medic's kit. A fragile sound, out of place in a world of ruin. Cher Ami lives. She lies on her side, feathers matted with blood, her right leg gone, her breast torn open by the bullet that nearly ended her flight. The tiny canister that once held the message, "Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us," still hangs from the shreds of the cord tied around her leg. The men cannot look at it without shivering. For many, it is the last proof that hope was not a delusion, that something pure had answered them through the smoke. A medic, his hands trembling more from awe than exhaustion, works by the dim light of a lantern. He cleans the wound, wraps what's left of the leg in gauze. "She's a tough one," he murmurs, voice breaking in the hush. "Stronger than most of us." Someone laughs. A dry, cracked sound that turns to weeping. Whittlesey crouches beside the crate, his uniform heavy with grime and sleeplessness. He looks down at the small bird that had carried salvation through fire, his eyes dark with something between reverence and disbelief. "You did it," he whispers. "You did what none of us could." Cher Ami stirs, her good wing twitching. Her head lifts, one glassy eye catching the lantern's light. She coos again, faint and steady. The men watch her, and for a moment, the war feels far away. Outside, stretcher bearers move like shadows through the forest, collecting the living and the dead. The wounded are carried away, some whispering prayers, others lost in silence. In the dim, ash-colored dawn, the forest floor looks like a graveyard of uniforms and roots. Yet in the center of it, that small cage gleams faintly, a fragile lantern of life amid the ruin. As the men are evacuated, Cher Ami goes with them. She rides in the lap of a medic who shields her from the jostling of the wagon. Mud splashes the wheels, and distant artillery still grumbles somewhere far off, echoes of a storm that has not yet learned it's over. The medic keeps his eyes on the bird, murmuring words only she can hear. "You rest now, little lady," he says softly. "You've done your duty." At the field hospital, nurses gather as the cage is carried in. They've seen every manner of wound, every cruelty the war could invent, but none like this. A pigeon with a shattered body, carried like a saint's relic. They work quickly, sewing the torn flesh, cleaning feathers that have stiffened with blood. Someone brings a shallow dish of water, another offers a few grains. She drinks faintly. She leaves. The news spreads quickly through the ranks. The Lost Battalion has been found, and the hero, a pigeon. In the tents and trenches beyond the Argonne, soldiers pass the story in low voices. "She flew through hell," one says. "Hit twice," they say. Another adds, "Carried the message anyway." The tale grows wings of its own. Carried from unit to unit, from rumor to reverent truth, that night Whittlesey cannot sleep. His thoughts circle the same image, the small grey bird disappearing into gunfire, carrying the fate of hundreds. He remembers how he'd released her with shaking hands, how he'd watched her vanish into the haze. For days, he'd believed she must have died, but she hadn't. She'd done the impossible. And because of that, men would see another dawn. He visits her before dawn, when the hospital is still and quiet. The nurse on duty nods silently as he enters. He kneels beside the crate and whispers, "We made it. Cher Ami, you brought us home." Her head tilts slightly, as if listening, as if the words mean something. Perhaps they do. Outside, the war grinds on. But for the survivors of the Lost Battalion, something has shifted. When they speak of courage, they no longer mean medals or ranks. They mean wings, fragile, wounded, defiant wings that carried them out of the abyss. Days pass. The forest where they had been trapped returns to quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like guilt. The trees still bear the scars of shellfire, their trunks splintered, their leaves burned to ash. And yet, in the stillness, nature begins its slow, stubborn repair. Grass creeps through craters. Birds return. Life insists on itself. So it is with Cher Ami. Her wounds heal slowly. She will never fly again, but her spirit seems unbroken. She coos when soldiers approach, sometimes fluttering her remaining wing, as if to remind them she once belonged to the sky. They bring her scraps of bread, grains, and small tokens. A button, a spent cartridge, a folded note of thanks. She accepts them all with the calm dignity of a creature who understands something deeper than language. The men who survived, those who once lay dying in the mud, waiting for her return, visit her whenever they can. They stand before her cage in silence, hats held to their chests, speaking softly as if in a chapel. Some tell her about their families, their hopes of going home. Others say nothing, only stare, eyes shining. To them, she is not just a bird. She is the proof that something good still breathes beneath the ruins of the world. By the time the armistice comes, the name Cher Ami has become legend. Newspapers print her story, artists sketch her likeness. Children in faraway towns read about her in the evening paper, imagining the brave little bird who flew through gunfire to save the Lost Battalion. But for those who knew her, who saw her rise from the forest floor, wounded and divine, no words can quite contain what she means. Whittlesey, now withdrawn and quiet, keeps a photograph of her on his desk. When asked about the battle, he seldom speaks of himself. "Ask about the bird," he says softly. "Ask about Cher Ami." In her small cage near the medic's tent, she watches the days lengthen into winter. Snow begins to fall over France, muffling the scars of war beneath white silence. The men are preparing to go home, to lives that no longer fit, to memories that will not sleep. They visit her one last time before they depart. One soldier, barely more than a boy, slips a scrap of ribbon through the cage bars. "For your medal," he says. "You earned it more than any of us." Cher Ami coos, eyes half closed, as if she understands. When the last of the soldiers leave, she remains behind for a while longer. A small reminder of grace in a landscape that forgot how to breathe. In the quiet after war, her cage becomes a shrine to what endures. Faith, courage, the unspoken bond between life and life. As dawn rises over the Argonne, the forest exhales. The guns have gone quiet. The sky, once filled with death, is open again. Somewhere, a dove takes flight, not her, not Cher Ami, but one like her. The air trembles with the sound of wings, and in that soft rustling above the trenches, it almost feels as though her spirit flies again. In time, she will journey home across the ocean, carried not by wind, but by the reverence of those she saved. And there, far from the battlefield, she will become something more than memory. The sea is calm when she returns. A grey Atlantic stretches endlessly beneath the low clouds. The same waters that once carried men toward destruction, now bearing one small life homeward. The ship creaks and hums, its decks lined with weary soldiers and silent crates. Among them, in a wooden box marked Cher Ami, Signal Corps, a pigeon sleeps beneath a soft cloth. She breathes faintly, her chest rising in small, unsteady waves, like the sea itself, fragile, rhythmic, alive. War is ending. Across the ocean, bells ring and flags rise. But on this vessel, peace feels fragile, something the men still do not know how to touch. They stand along the railings, watching the horizon, faces drawn by memories they cannot speak aloud. Some bear scars, some carry ghosts, yet every man aboard knows her name. Cher Ami, they whisper when they pass her crate. The little bird who saved us. Stories follow her like a quiet wake. The tale of the Lost Battalion has crossed front lines and newspapers alike. Of the men trapped in the Argonne Forest, surrounded and bombarded by their own artillery, and of the Pigeon who flew through fire to deliver salvation. Her courage has already become legend before she reaches the shore. When the ship docks in New Jersey, the harbor hums with waiting crowds. Flags ripple in the cold air, cameras flash, reporters jostle for a glimpse. Among the returning soldiers are generals and privates alike, men who faced death and came home. But the press does not ask for them first, they ask for the Pigeon. "Where is Cher Ami?" one man calls. The hero of the 77th, on an officer steps forward, lifting the small crate carefully. Inside, she stirs, a bundle of grey feathers, one bright eye blinking at the sudden light. The crowd presses forward, breathless, as if expecting a miracle. She does not coo, does not flinch, only tilts her head, calm and steady, as though wondering at this noisy new world. A soldier at her side removes his cap. "She's the reason we're here," he says quietly, and the crowd falls silent. That evening, the newspapers carry her story across America. Winged messenger saves nearly 200 men. Cher Ami, the hero Pigeon, her name travels faster than the war's end itself. In homes across the country, mothers read her story to their children by lamplight, their voices soft with awe. Fathers, who once served, fold the paper slowly, their eyes wet and distant. The army, too, prepares its tribute. In a quiet ceremony beneath the autumn sun, officers gather around a small perch draped in the American flag. Cher Ami, resting in the hands of a handler, watches as the medals are presented. A band plays softly, not the martial trumpets of battle, but a hymn-like tune, slow and tender, for extraordinary bravery and service. The officer declares, the French government awards the Croix de Guerre, with palm to Cher Ami of the U.S. Army Signal Corps. A ripple of applause breaks, subdued yet reverent. The medal is hung near her cage, gleaming like a star beside her broken leg. Someone whispers, she looks proud. But if pride lives in her, it is quiet, the kind born not from glory, but from having endured. After the ceremony, children are allowed to approach. They lean close, eyes wide, whispering her name like a spell. One little girl asks, "Does she know she's a hero?" A soldier smiles faintly. "She knows she did something good," he says. "That's enough." Yet fame, even gentle fame, is a strange thing. In the weeks that follow, Cher Ami is carried from one hall to another, from army posts to public exhibitions. People come to see her, to marvel at the bird who braved bullets for men she'd never known. Photographers position her beneath soft light, capturing her wounded side, her missing leg, her calm gaze. A portrait of courage, one caption reads. But in the quiet moments between the crowds, when the flashbulbs fade, she remains what she always was. A creature of stillness. She coos softly when the room empties, pecking at seeds laid in her dish. Her keeper, a young corporal, speaks to her in low tones. "You're safe now, girl," he says, brushing a feather from her wing. No more war, no more noise. In those evenings, when the windows darken and the city hums beyond, Cher Ami seems to listen to the world breathing again. A world she helped keep alive. For the men of the 77th Division, her homecoming stirs something deeper than pride. They gather sometimes in cafes or veterans' halls, their uniforms faded, their laughter edged with memory, and always someone brings up the pigeon. "Remember when Whittlesey said she wouldn't make it?" One man chuckles. "Said the Germans would shoot her down before she cleared the ridge." "She did anyway," another replies. "Took the message right through hell." Then a pause. The table grows quiet. Someone lifts his glass. To Cher Ami. The toast passes through the room like a prayer. They do not drink to generals, nor to battles, nor to the victory itself. They drink to the fragile thing that carried them through. To courage in its smallest form. Outside, the city glows with peacetime lights. The war is receding into memory, into books, into parades. Yet for those who remember the forest, the hunger, the fear, the sudden silence after the guns, her flight remains vivid as a heartbeat. Whittlesey himself, now withdrawn and wary, receives letters almost daily. People ask him about the Lost Battalion, about the rescue, about the Pigeon. He answers sparingly. "She did her duty," he writes once, and we are alive because of it. Beyond that, he says little. Some stories are too sacred to be retold by human mouths. Months pass. Cher Ami's fame becomes part of the national memory. Paintings of her hang in schools. Poems are written in her honor. Even the military academies mention her in their lectures. A footnote in the lesson of perseverance. Yet beneath the medals and tributes, she remains unchanged. Her cage sits near a window in the Signal Corps loft, where light filters through each morning. Sometimes pigeons outside call to her from the rooftops. Wild cousins who have never known war. She answers softly, her voice carrying through the bars, a faint echo of the skies she once ruled. The men who work nearby pause when they hear her. "That's Cher Ami," one says quietly, still talking to the wind. Winter deepens. Snow gathers along the window ledge, muffling the world. The war has ended, but its shadows linger in nightmares, in hospitals, in the silence of dinner tables missing someone's voice. Yet the sight of her, small and steady, brings comfort. She is a reminder that even through horror, something beautiful endures. One evening, a veteran visits her alone. He had been there, one of the 194. He stands before her cage for a long while, his breath clouding the glass. "You saved us," he murmurs finally. "Every one of us. I never thanked you." He presses his palm to the cage, eyes glistening. "Would have died out there. But you just kept flying." Cher Ami blinks slowly, her head dipping once. Perhaps she understands. Perhaps not. But her stillness carries an answer. A kind of peace that words can only chase and never catch. When he leaves, the room settles into quiet again. The medal beside her glimmers faintly in the lamplight. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of the sea, the same sea that once bore her home. And in that moment, one might imagine her as she once was, cutting through smoke, wings ragged but sure, the weight of men's hope bound to her leg. She is no longer flying, yet her presence feels like motion, a living memory that refuses to rest. She has come home not only to a nation, but to history itself, and history, for once, bows its head. In the quiet halls where her story is told, her shadow stretches beyond the war, into memory, into myth. Soon, she will find her final resting place beneath glass and time itself, where her courage will outlive her fragile form. The war has ended, yet its echoes hum in every corner of the world. The fields of France are scarred, the trenches abandoned, but beneath the soil lie the memories of a generation that gave everything. Among those memories, quiet and winged, is Cher Ami. She spends her last days far from the gunfire that once defined her. In a gentle loft tended by army caretakers, she is treated as both veteran and friend. Her wounds, though long since healed, still tell the story of battle. The missing eye, the leg bound forever to a sliver of wood where once there had been life. But she coos softly, as if to reassure those who visit her that peace, at last, has settled in. The caretakers speak of her in low voices. "She made it," they say. "That little bird made it through hell." And indeed, Cher Ami's survival feels like a quiet miracle. A message that endurance, no matter how small its vessel, can carry across continents and through chaos. When she dies in 1919, the army honors her not with a soldier's burial, but with preservation, the promise that her story will never fade into the grey wash of history. Her body is carefully prepared, feathers brushed smooth, eyes closed in a gesture of eternal rest. Taxidermists work not out of vanity, but reverence. They freeze her in the pose of her final flight, one wing half lifted, the other slightly bowed, as though she still carries the note that saved a battalion. And then she travels again. This time, not across the shell-torn skies of France, but across the Atlantic, returning to the land she once represented. America, weary yet proud, welcomes her home once more. The Smithsonian Institution receives her with solemnity. The glass cases there hold relics of revolution and exploration, the bones of mammoths, the tools of vanished tribes. But in one small corner of the museum, they prepare a pedestal for a single pigeon. Her label is simple: Cher Ami, hero of the 77th Division, World War I, awarded the Croix de Guerre for gallantry in service 1918. It is a quiet display, no fanfare, no trumpet of heroism. Just a bird, a fragment of wood tied to her leg, and a photograph of the men she saved, faces streaked with mud, eyes lit with something between exhaustion and awe. Decades pass. Visitors come and go. Children stand on tiptoe to see her better, their reflections mingling with hers in the museum glass. They read the small inscription and ask their parents, "A pigeon did that." Their voices carry wonder, disbelief, a soft awe that history still has room for the humble. Elderly veterans visit, too. Those who remember what it meant to wait for a message, to scan the horizon for a small dark shape that might mean life. They stand quietly before her, their hands trembling as if saluting an old comrade. To them, Cher Ami is not just a pigeon. She is memory made feather and bone, a messenger of faith in impossible times. In the years that follow, wars will come again, each claiming its own symbols of courage. But Cher Ami's story remains distinct, a whisper of gentleness in a world too often hardened by steel and fire. Teachers bring their students. Curators dust the case. A janitor, sweeping the marble floor one morning, pauses to look. He doesn't know her story in full, only that she flew through war and came home a hero. Still, he nods to her, as one might to an old friend who's seen too much and rests at last. In the silence of the museum, the hum of air conditioning replaces the roar of artillery. The light above her glass shifts with the seasons, sometimes warm and golden, sometimes pale and cold. Yet she endures, ageless. Visitors pass, and for a moment, a heartbeat, a breath, they stop to look. That is her true immortality. Cher Ami does not speak. She does not need to. Her story is written in the curve of her wings, in the tiny band still tied around her leg, in the reverence that lingers like dust motes in the air. And so she becomes part of the museum's quiet symphony of remembrance. A single note among thousands, but one that hums eternally beneath the noise of modern life. She stands for something that every age risks forgetting. That courage is not measured by size, nor by weapon, nor by command. It can be small enough to fit in a pair of trembling wings. Sometimes a visitor will linger a little longer, hand pressed to the glass. Maybe they're thinking of someone they lost, or something they once believed in. Maybe they're listening, truly listening. And in that stillness, they can almost hear it, the faint flutter of wings through time, carrying a message from a battlefield long gone. We are alive. Do not give up. The words are a century old now, but they echo still. For what is a museum, if not a vessel for memory, a kind of ark for stories that would otherwise drown in the flood of forgetting? Within its walls, the past breathes gently, asking nothing but remembrance. Cher Ami rests among other relics, uniforms, medals, letters stained with mud and longing. But she outshines them all, not by grandeur, but by grace. She represents the fragile thread that connects courage and compassion, war and the will to survive. And as generations pass, she continues to teach, without words, without movement, that heroism can arrive on the smallest wings. Some evenings, when the museum is closed and the lights dim to a soft twilight, one could imagine her still in flight. The faint rustle of the air vents might sound like feathers. The moonlight pooling through the high windows might seem to glimmer on a wing mid-beat. In that silence, the world outside fades. The noise of the city softens. History breathes, slow and steady. And Cher Ami, forever suspended between life and legend, keeps flying through memory, through time, through every heart that pauses to remember her. And so she remains, a silent messenger in glass, carrying not a note but a memory. Yet even in stillness, her flight is not over, for the story of courage does not end in a museum. It drifts onward toward the lives her wings once saved. The years pass. The roar of the guns fades into the hush of soil reclaiming itself. The forests of France, once torn by shrapnel and screams, grow green again. Wildflowers rise where barbed wire once coiled. The trenches fill with rain, then silence, then time. History exhales, and yet something of the war still lingers, invisible but alive. Among the names remembered in marble and metal, there remains one carved softly into the folds of story: Cher Ami. No longer does she fly through smoke or shadow. Her body rests beneath museum light, and yet her spirit continues to travel across years, across hearts, across the invisible air that carries memory. For memory, too, has wings. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the city outside the Smithsonian still sleeps, the museum breathes its slow nocturnal rhythm. The faint hum of lights, the settling creak of wood and glass, the soft whisper of air, and perhaps, if one listens long enough, one might imagine the brush of feathers somewhere above the exhibits. The echo of wings that once carried hope through war. Her story has become part of something larger, the invisible chain of remembrance that links every act of courage, no matter how small, to the enduring pulse of humanity. Teachers speak her name in classrooms when they teach of World War I, the war that promised to end all wars, but did not. Children trace the photograph of the Pigeon with her bandaged leg and ask how she knew where to go. The question is simple, yet unanswerable. How did she find her way? Perhaps she followed the pull of loyalty, or instinct, or something beyond either. That quiet compass all creatures hold when love outweighs fear. The soldiers she saved grew old. Some lived long enough to see another war begin, and the echo of what she did returned to them in the faces of their sons. They told her story around kitchen tables and veterans' halls, voices soft with disbelief. "We thought we were dead," one would say, until she came. There was no need to say who she was. They all knew. Her name travelled across generations, not through command or glory, but through wonder. It appeared in newspapers, in children's books, in whispered recollections. A creature of feathers became a legend of endurance. Even as the world grew faster, planes in the skies, radios in every home, satellites orbiting above, the story of one pigeon persisted, defying the indifference of progress. Because some stories do not age, they only deepen. In an age of machines, Cher Ami remains something human, fragile, brave, uncalculated. Her flight becomes a metaphor not only for rescue, but for faith itself. The belief that what is small can still change the vast. Some who visit the museum feel it without needing to read her plaque. They linger longer than they expect to, their gaze drawn to that small form encased in stillness. There is something magnetic in it, something that feels like forgiveness or perhaps endurance made visible. In that moment, they see not just a bird, but the ghost of a heartbeat that once crossed the impossible. Outside, the world continues. Cars move, nations rise and fall, the air hums with the static of modern noise. Yet somewhere beneath it all, in the quiet frequency of memory, wings still beat. Those wings have crossed more than battlefields now. They have carried messages of peace, of unity, of awe. Veterans' families write to the Smithsonian, sending letters of gratitude, stories of their ancestors who were saved that day. The curators keep them in a small archive, each letter another ripple in the long water of remembrance. In one, a child writes, "If she could do that, maybe I can be brave too." It is a small line, printed in pencil, but it hums with the same vibration that once filled the air over the Argonne Forest. The quiet power of belief. Time has a way of transforming war into lesson, and lesson into story, and story into myth. Yet, Cher Ami's myth resists grandeur. It does not demand statues or songs. It only asks for a moment of stillness. A pause long enough to remember that courage is not the opposite of fear, but the choice to move despite it. And so she remains, fluttering through history's long corridor, a symbol for all who have carried messages of life through danger, for all who have flown toward the impossible. The echo of her wings is not loud. It does not command attention. It is the kind of sound that exists between things, between night and morning, between despair and hope. It is the sound of a world rediscovering tenderness after great loss. When modern soldiers visit the Smithsonian, some stop before her display and stand very still. They have seen drones and satellites and coded transmissions that travel at the speed of light. Yet before this small pigeon, they lower their heads, because in her stillness lies something faster, older, truer, the pulse of devotion that no technology can replicate. War has always made use of wings, but rarely have wings taught war how to feel. Cher Ami's legacy becomes not just a remembrance of what was, but a reminder of what must never be forgotten, that even amid ruin, compassion can still fly. At night, the museum rests, and outside, the city breathes under its thin veil of stars. Somewhere, perhaps, a real pigeon lands on the building's stone ledge, feathers rustling, eyes bright. It knows nothing of medals or myth, only of the wind that lifts it, the instinct that guides it home. But in that moment, between the living bird and the one preserved within, something passes. A continuity of flight, an inheritance of hope. The past speaks not through words but through motion, through wings that rise again each time a story is retold, through the invisible arc that connects survival to remembrance. And maybe that's how history endures, not in the noise of victory, but in the soft persistence of small lives that refuse to fall. For when we tell her story, we keep her flying. When we whisper her name, Cher Ami, she takes off again, gliding through the air between centuries. Her message unchanged. We are alive. Do not give up. The forests that once echoed with gunfire now echo with birdsong. The rivers that ran red now shimmer blue again beneath sunlight. And somewhere in that calm, the faintest whisper remains. The rhythm of wings, beating not for war, but for the quiet miracle of life itself. The sound fades, yet its echo lingers, a soft flutter across time. And as one story lands, another prepares to rise, for history, too, has wings that never truly rest. And so, dear listener, the candle of that night burns quietly still, its flame flickering across a century of silence. The guns have long gone silent, the forests have grown back green and untroubled, but somewhere, in the hush between heartbeats, the echo of tiny wings still hums. Cher Ami reminds us that greatness doesn't always stride. Sometimes, it drifts softly on the wind. It may come feathered, fragile, and trembling, yet carry the strength to save a world. Her courage was not loud, but it reached further than the roar of cannons. And though time has carried her story far from that battlefield, its light remains. A small, steady lantern in the long corridors of memory. Thank you truly for sharing this quiet space with me tonight. For sitting here, in the gentle fold of time, listening to the heartbeat of a moment that might have been forgotten. You are part of something timeless, a quiet chain of listeners who keep the embers of history warm, simply by remembering softly. So now, let your thoughts settle like the last snow melting from a branch. Let the weight of the day drift away, and rest in the stillness that follows understanding. May your dreams carry you to peaceful places, to green fields after rain, to skies where small wings still fly toward the light. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in, and every story is a soft place to rest. If this tale brought you calm, you are always welcome to return. There will always be another candle waiting, another whisper of history to cradle you through the night. Sleep well, dear listener. May courage find you gently, like a feather settling in the dark, and may the echo of Cher Ami's flight guide you into dreams of quiet light.